Welcome to part 23 of this video series. Today I'm going to be discussing creating and controlling electricity for your small liveaboard boat. And a special thank you to those who have already subscribed to the channel. And again, thank you so much for supporting the creation of this video series. If you haven't done so already, then please remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos in this series. Okay, so I'll first talk about ways to create electricity, and then I'll talk about how to control it using inverters, etc. So, simply put, there are about 5 different ways to create electricity when you're a liveaboard. The first is the absolute simplest, and that's shore power. Most marinas have either 30 amp or 50 amp outlets. Now, most small liveaboard boats don't need 50 amps, unless you're wintering in Alaska and want to heat your boat with electricity, that is. But if you do cook with electricity, you might want 30 amps. There are some places that offer 15 amp service, which is what a basic home outlet is, but for many reasons, these are few and far between. These you'll find a lot more common on people's private docks. Now, if all you're using the shore power for is stuff like charging electronics, then 15 amps would be fine, and you can find 30 amp to 15 amp converters. However, 15 amp extension cords are your basic lawn and garden type, and most marinas will not let you use these. 30 amp extension cords are much more heavy duty. Most common small boat liveaboards use a 30 amp extension cord, then split it into 15 amps once it's on the boat. And most small appliances that are used for cooking, whether it be a hot plate or a microwave, use about 15 amps each. Now, for the rest of us who travel and like to anchor out, we need a more off-grid solution. And in this case, it is a lot easier and cheaper to conserve the amount of electricity used than to create it. For example, using gas for cooking, LED lights instead of incandescent lights, etc. Having said that, if you can afford and you do have the space to create a large complex electrical system, not needing these things like gas for cooking can save you many headaches down the line. I won't say it'll save you a lot of money, because no matter what type of batteries you use for your system, at some point they will need to be replaced, which may come out more expensive than gas in the long run. Oh, and as far as what type of batteries you should use, you need to do your research here. The general rule of thumb is the more expensive, the longer they last. But there are so many exceptions to that rule, and prices of each type vary greatly, and they change every single day. Okay, so the first portable way to create electricity is using an alternator or generator. Both are essentially the same thing as far as what we're talking about today is concerned. These can be attached to your engine, so whenever you run your engine, it creates electricity, or attached to its own engine, like in the case of a portable generator. Using your engine to create electricity is great if you're traveling under power each day. But if you're sitting somewhere for a long period of time, having to run a large engine to create electricity can be expensive. Smaller, portable generators are usually much more fuel efficient than your boat's main engines. They also give you household voltage, so you don't need an inverter. They typically have a 12-volt output as well to charge your batteries, but it's usually a fairly low current, which means your batteries will charge very slowly. If you want a generator specifically for charging batteries, they do make them, and they can put out a lot of current for charging at very low voltages. However, these are not common, especially here in North America. Now, there is a major downside to creating electricity this way, besides the price of fuel, and that is noise. Not only might it bother you, but it will certainly bother the other boats around you. With the exception of using the boat's alternator while underway, or using a portable generator to do things like run power tools to do repairs, I don't recommend this method at all. The next method I'm going to quickly mention is water generators. These are used mainly for sailboats, and even then, not that much anymore. Basically, it's a propeller connected to a line connected to a small generator on the back of the boat. Although, there are some modern versions that have swing-down legs. The idea is, as the boat moves through the water, it drags the propeller, spinning the generator, making electricity. The thing is, they're pretty much pointless for a motorboat, as a motor's alternator can produce a lot more power, and the fact they create drag is also an issue. I did, however, meet one liveaboard who anchored full-time in a fairly fast-moving river. He was able to make electricity with one while he was sitting at anchor. Now, wind generators are a pretty straightforward concept. Wind moves something similar to a propeller to spin the generator. These used to be very popular with cruisers because they gave the most power per dollar. However, most are noisy and do require maintenance. They do have the advantage, however, of being capable of producing electricity 24 hours a day, as long as there's enough wind. Oh, and on that note, I should mention the modern ones require very little wind to move. They have both vertical and horizontal models. Which is best depends on your space and situation. One issue that small liveaboards have with these is finding enough space to safely install them. The most common way today to create off-grid electricity is solar. These have no moving parts, therefore they do not need any maintenance, other than keeping them clean, that is. These keep coming down in price and keep getting more powerful. Solar panels basically come in two styles, either flexible or rigid. Flexible solar panels are thin, light, and slightly bendable, while rigid solar panels are encased in glass and most often have a metal frame. Rigid panels tend to be more durable and have longer lifespan than flexible solar panels do, though the technology of flexible solar panels is improving rapidly. Rigid solar panels do offer more efficiency than flexible panels in general. Most solar panels these days are produced in China, but there are all sorts of quality issues. If you buy a panel in, let's say, North America, chances are it was still made in China, but the North American company should have checked the quality of their supplier for you. I've bought 2 sets of solar panels directly from China. They were the flexible type. First set I bought worked great for a long time until they were stolen. Oh yeah, don't forget to check out the video in this series on security. Now, the second set, on the first hot day, they blistered all over the place, making them virtually useless. Now, as far as where to mount them, there are lots of options. If you are mounting the rigid ones, they can be mounted on railings or radar arches. Both types can be mounted on top of a cabin, and flexible types can be mounted on biminies, etc. Two of the most important things when deciding where to mount their panels is shade and angle. Solar panels drastically reduce power when they're at angle to the sun, or even part of them are shaded. If you can mount them in such a way that you can move them to angle them to the sun, that is by far the best way. Powerboats for the most part have an easier time avoiding shade than sailboats with their mast and rigging, etc. Now, the best way to produce electricity for a liveaboard is a hybrid setup. That is, multiple ways of creating electricity. Solar is great for sunny days, but wind works better at night and in inclement weather. And if you're under power, why not produce some from your engine? Now, one more little story is of my tiny liveaboard boat. It has solar panels and a special 48-volt generator. That combined powers the electric motors. There is no gas motor on board. The batteries, which are charged by the solar panels, last for about 4 hours of propulsion. If I still want to go on past that point, I need to start the generator to power the electric motors. There are boats that are fully solar paneled, but they are extremely expensive and designed specifically for that purpose. If you want to see my tiny liveaboard, there will be a link below. There are 2 different ways to control the amount of current going into your batteries, and you definitely want to do this because not only does controlling it lengthen the lifespan of your battery, but if you overcharge your battery, you can wreck them, and that's either using a PWM controller or an MPPT controller. PWMs are much cheaper than MPPTs, but MPPTs are much more efficient. If you have the money, then an MPPT controller is really worth it. Now, unfortunately, there are a lot of fake MPPT controllers out there, so you have to do your research. But 2 basic rules of thumb are, if it's cheap, then chances are it's a fake MPPT controller, and MPPT controllers are physically a lot larger than PWM controllers. The last thing we're going to talk about today is inverters. The typical boat, especially here in North America, runs a 12-volt system. This is fine for lights, etc., but if you need household current to run something like a microwave or computer, then you'll need an inverter. These come in all sizes. What you need to do is figure out how much wattage you need first. We all remember the old incandescent bulbs being rated in watts. You know, like a 60-watt bulb? That's how much power it uses. So you need to figure out how many watts of electricity you will draw at one time. If you use more than one thing at the same time, you need to add them together. One more thing you need to decide is between a pure sine wave inverter or a modified sine wave inverter. There are 2 main differences between a pure and modified sine wave inverter: efficiency and cost. Pure sine wave inverters are good at 2 things: efficiently powering devices that use AC, and powering devices like radio or electronics that can suffer from interference, but they can be expensive. On the other hand, a modified sine wave inverter may produce some interference, resulting in a less than pure current, but they are less expensive than their pure sine wave counterparts. I should mention microwaves in particular have a tendency to work much more efficiency using a pure sine wave inverter. When you do go to buy an inverter, you have to do your research, because if you plan on buying online, there are a lot of fakes out there. Ones that say they're a lot more powerful than they are, or claim to be a pure sine wave when they're only a modified sine wave. So be careful. Now, if I missed anything, or if you have any thoughts or ideas about this subject or ideas for future subjects that I have not covered, please let me know in the comments below. I absolutely love hearing from you. And thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video series on living aboard a small boat. If you have, then please subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Also, I included links to all the past videos in the description below.